New York Catholic Conference calls out State of New York's campus contraceptive mandate, calling it abhorrent. Even while fighting for people's lives, New York progressives can always make room for the sacrifice of more babies. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're talking about Georgetown, a so-called Catholic university, which recently held a panel where members were more concerned about how COVID-19 would impact Ramadan and the marginalized without a single mention of, Christians celebrating Easter. Plus, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio looks to slash the city's education budget by $221 million. And we dive into some real education with today's instant classic featuring a mosaic, an ancient Roman mosaic of Alexander the Great. But we start in New York, where a new bill is getting heat as it would order all colleges to display information about their morning after pill on the college campuses themselves. So here we have a situation where the state of New York is decided that amongst everything else going on, the abortion of babies must continue apace. And a Catholic organization, notice that it's a Catholic conference, not, the Pope, who's too busy blaming environmental destruction for human destruction of the environment for everything. Notice that it's not a Catholic bishop or a cardinal. Can't be bothered. It's a Catholic conference, a group of concerned New York Catholics calling the practice abhorrent, using basically creating martial law for abortion in the state of New York.
So this whole bill from the New York State Legislature started last year when State Senator Kevin Parker introduced Senate Bill S5089, and that bill is currently in committees in both the state houses, and it would enact the Public University Emergency Contraception Education Act. Just sounds so fancy. And it would mandate that, quote, every college and university of the State University of New York and the City University of New York would receive informational materials and posters concerning emergency contraception and place them in conspicuous places all over campus.
Yeah. Mom and Dad, now do you see what we've been telling you for years? This is one of my Dr. Duke was right moments. I mean, hey, I have so few of them outside of the education sphere. I'm gonna take them.
Take them where you can.
Do you see now how much of what passes for schooling, whether on the college campuses or in the public schools, literally has nothing to do with education? Many of our stories this week you're going to see show school's out, right? All teachers have to do is log on and teach online. It's not that complicated. Do you see how much education news has to do with unions, has to do with abortion, has to do with environmentalism, has to do with 1,000 things, feeding your kids for you because, you can't do that. How much of what we talk about now with the schools has nothing to do with schools? The schools, and you're going to see one really particularly smug North Carolina superintendent this week, watch the show all week, who actually has the temerity to come out and say, you can criticize the fact that your kids can't read all you want, but I'm too busy feeding your kids to care.
And loving them.
Loving
yes. On them. So these contraceptives, as we've talked about, the morning after pill, just so everyone's aware of what the morning after pill is, it has a higher dose of hormones than any traditional birth control. So you take it after you have unprotected sex so that it would basically deem
it kills babies.
Yes.
Yeah,
you'll say it.
Let me
You'll
take
say
that
bluntly.
That beautifully clinical description, and call it what it is. It's a pill that kills babies.
So according to the bill that they, again, currently have going through committees in both houses, they deem it essential that each college and university, the State University of New York and City University of New York, provide information on emergency contraception to its students and makes it available to any student who seeks it. Now, if you would replace that with education, they would provide education to any student who seeks it, but they don't do that at universities anymore. They just give you birth control.
It is amazing how the social mission of the universities carries on apace, right? They don't miss a beat with all of this, except that they get to blame Trump and blame conservatives and blame what the New York Times blamed Christians for the promulgation of COVID-19. So yeah, what you see here is, and I hope we remember this, let's say for the sake of argument, by end of July, this is more or less over, or round one is more or less over, and you're considering what to do, ask yourself a serious question. This is a time you have been, moms and dads, you have been forced to reconsider things because of this virus. If your kids are in the public schools, you ought to really be thinking about how to educate them outside of the public schools. You should not be lamenting the fact that for 8 hours a day your kids are at home. You have got to figure out a way. My big concern is that when this is over, parents are going to be like, oh God, anything, just get my kids away from me, right?
That's exactly what's going to happen.
Right? If there's more of that, the country is in really bad shape.
It's in really bad shape because we see it after every summer, after every Christmas break, after spring break. This is going to be ultimate. But just so everyone knows, we need to give the credit to the New York State Catholic Conference. They're the one who published the memorandum of opposition to the bill, and they did that just this last month. And the conference, they actually call themselves the official voice of the Catholic Church in the Empire State.
Because there's no actual Catholic leadership in the state of New York. And it's not just the Catholic Conference, and God bless them for doing what they're doing. They're not alone in opposing this bill. The religious group New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms, I like that, a religious group called New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms. That's just a whole bunch of good, right? Petition their readers to email the state legislators, and, quote, urge them to oppose the bill, claiming that the promotion of emergency contraception could encourage risky behavior and lead to the spread of sexually transmitted diseases on public university campuses. That's a little bit naive, right? If you think that it's not, the college campus dorms are a petri dish of social justice ideology and chlamydia. I mean, it's all it is, right? It's one big drunken alcoholic. You would think all the alcohol they're drinking would kill all the sexually transmitted diseases. Doesn't work that way.
No. Well, since we're talking about diseases and all that, obviously we know COVID-19 and the crisis that is being used on various college campuses for whatever excuse they want. Well, at the beginning of Holy Week last week, Georgetown University.
Holy Week.
Yep.
And a Catholic Jesuit college, you would think those things would go together.
Well, yeah, but they don't. So the Georgetown University Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, they decided because of COVID they couldn't get together. So they held a Zoom conference online. It was a webinar called The COVID-19 Crisis, taking stock of religious responses.
So Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley Center for Religion.
It's Georgetown University, Berkeley Center.
So my point is that who is Georgetown allying with? Catholic teaching on things like abortion or religious holidays, or the University of California, Berkeley?
It's Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. So they held this Zoom webinar, and they were going to talk about how to move forward with religious services because of COVID-19, the crisis. And the response is that, what should the religious community be doing at this time? So they didn't, again, it's Holy Week, didn't even address how billions of Christians weren't going to be able to go sit in their church pews, weren't going to be able to celebrate Easter together. But what did they talk about? Ramadan.
How hard this will be
for Ramadan
on Muslims,
coming up. As the College Fix wrote, at the panel, neither the virus's impact on the campus and the globe's Christians, nor the topic of the Jewish Passover was raised. Instead, the religion experts zeroed in on how the lockdown has complicated observing the upcoming month of Ramadan for the Islamic community, as well as how the COVID-19 response has hurt the marginalized in society, such as refugees.
Right. So in other words, it's another social, again, my point from the previous story remains that what they do and what they're doing in spite of the lockdown is they're carrying their full left-wing, radically progressive, secular, I don't care what Georgetown pretends to be, secular materialist worldview. They're pushing that on all fronts.
So the panel had a senior fellow doing the moderator, Imam Mohammed Magid, an independent consultant on humanitarian emergencies, David Robinson, and Olivia Wilkinson, director of research at the Joint Learning Initiative on Faith in Local Communities. I want to get your take on here. The Imam, he said, I think that this crisis will force many religious communities to come up with a different attitude and focus on the whole community. As you are catering to the needs of your community, you realize that you are not on an island. I don't think the world will be the same after this. Even our teaching and preaching will change.
Pure globalism, right? The reason that there has been no fight between globalists and Islamists is they want the same thing. They want one world government. The Muslims, the radical Muslims, just think that they're going to have a chance to make it Islam. You're not, right? It's going to be globalism. So I suppose we should look brightly ahead to our globalist future and recognize at least the threat from Islam will be neutralized when we're all under the boot heel of the central government of the world.
And leading the charge, maybe one of
Georgetown
those.
University. You know the Catholic Church is already sold out, right? You got a Roman Catholic Pope who is basically helping the Chinese bulldoze Christian churches, right?
This is true. Okay.
A guy who blames COVID-19 not on something God wants us to change our lives about, but the environment, right? What's the difference between Mia Farrow and the Pope?
I'd say gender, but we're not allowed to say that.
Catholic priests have actually molested kids. It was her husband who did it. And yet they both have the same attitude towards global warming. The COVID virus is a response of our mistreatment of the planet. And add Spike Lee to that.
Spike Lee, there you go.
Yeah.
We'll put him in there.
Do the right thing. Jungle Fever. That's Spike Lee.
Moving on. We're going to take a look at New York City and Mayor Bill de Blasio. Poor thing. He's going to be having to make some hard decisions, and it comes in the form of $221 million in education cuts, and this includes all of his pet projects. Maybe not all of them, but a few of them. The single largest cut is going to take effect next fiscal year, where he is going to cut $100 million, which will come out of the Fair Student Funding. The Fair Student Funding, I wonder what that is. And it's basically a funding stream. It directly finances school budgets and it's designed to funnel more money to the highest need schools. So that's going to be cut. And it represents $100 million represents just 1.6% reduction in the funding stream.
Right. And
think about that.
This whole proposal is going to cut about $221 million. That's about 2%, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. What does it tell? And we're not talking about the state of New York.
Just New York City.
We're talking New York City. New York City, where $221 million a year covers 2% of what they spend, and their kids still aren't learning anything.
Yeah, so the reductions are going to target some of his biggest, education priorities, including the pre-K, which is wildly being heralded as his signature achievement. The city's putting the brakes on and expanding a pre-K for all. It's called pre-K for all to the 3-year-olds. And I've been saying this for years now. At what point are the moms just going to pop their kid out in the hospital and the kid's going to go off to school?
Yeah, this is a mom and dad problem, right? I mean, well, New York is an interesting case because you have a significant gap between the wealthy, privileged nanny owners, the Trumpers who can have the Donald Trump types, the Hollywood types, the Broadway types, and then you've got huge minority populations where you have incredibly large numbers of single African-American female parents who are also the biggest demographic getting abortions. Just a couple years ago, we did a story where 50% that year, I don't know if it was 2017, 2018, but 50% of all conceived black babies in New York City were aborted. 50% of them. So what's happening here, I guess the other 50% who are having these kids get to send them off to preschool. No one has to look after the kids, right? Yeah. The rich can afford their nannies. The poor can abort them or send them to Blasio's indoctrination camps.
Well, that's getting cut now, so
it's getting cut.
For now.
And by the way, if he's cutting 2% of the budget and the first thing that goes is this garbage, how much utter and complete pork is in this budget? How much money do they actually need? I'll bet you if they're getting what's take that number and multiply it, right? What does 220 million equal if it's only 2% of the budget?
Too much.
That's a lot. I can't do the math in my head.
So some of the other things that are taking a hit include the equity and excellence agenda, including a program that pairs middle school students with one-on-one counselors, which I don't know why a middle school student would need a one-on-one counselor other than for them to direct exactly what they want them to be. And then another aimed at setting students on the path to college. A summer program that provides hands-on activities for students and visits to cultural institutions is also being scaled back. Cutting just those programs are going to save you $49 million this year.
Right.
$49 million. Money
derived to taking kids out of school and sending them places.
Yeah. They're also going to cut the summer youth employment program, and with that and other things, it's going to save $124 million over this year and next year.
What in the world does a summer hiring program do to educate kids? Nothing. It just gives them money to get through the summer.
It gives 75,000 young people minimum wage jobs at nonprofits, in government, and private companies.
Feeding the next army of Barack Obama's community organizers.
Now you know the
Again,
rest
did
of
you
the
see, Mom and Dad,
story.
what we've said? How much of what you that little bit that's being cut from the budget, how much of it had anything at all to do with schooling? Almost none of it, right? It's about social and career opportunities for kids over the summer. It's about feeding them into the social justice pipeline. I mean, this has nothing to do with educating. I mean, you could educate your kids. Well, the average homeschool mom spends about $500 a year homeschooling her kid. $500. We're spending exponentially higher to educate our public school kids, and they're not getting an education.
And we don't even know how much of the money
No.
is being spent on each kid is actually being spent
No.
on each kid.
It's going to unions and pensions, and it's going to Red for Ed, and it's going for all kinds of crazy things in the classroom that have nothing to do with giving your kids basic literacy and functionality in this world.
Well, that just I'm sick and tired of all that. So you know what? Let's get some real education. We're going to take a look at a Great Mosaic today. Alexander the Great Mosaic, to be exact. It's originally a floor mosaic that was made in the House of the Faun in Pompeii, believed to be made between 120 and 100 BC. And if you want to see the original, you have to visit the Naples National Archaeological Museum, or you can just take a look at the image that we're going to depict of Alexander the Great and Darius III of Persia. Now, the original size is 8 feet 11 inches by 16 feet 9 inches.
Yeah, take a look at the picture, Mike. Throw it up there for them. This is you can see where all the tiles are missing, and that's because, again, you can't tell from this image, but this is actually a floor mosaic. So it was something you would walk on, like in a rich person's bathhouse. It's really quite beautiful, and it's all tile, right? Tiny pieces of mosaic tiled glass, multicolored. You can see what it looks like now. Unfortunately, it was destroyed. It was buried in the ash of Pompeii. When Mount Vesuvius went off in the 1st century AD, this thing had not even been 200 years old yet. It was covered by the molten ash, and you can see, if you go back to the first picture there, huge gaps in what was they were able to resurrect from the ash. If you go to the next picture, get a little bit closer picture, you see this, just give you a sense of how gorgeous this is. That is one of the only authentic, it's one of the pictures of Alexander the Great we have from antiquity. We have some coins with his face on it, but that is about as good as it gets. Oftentimes when you see an image of Alexander the Great, it comes from this mosaic, right? And you can just see how beautifully done this inlaid glass is. Look at the face of the horse. Look at the bridle of the horse. The stare in the face of the conqueror. Back up one step, Mike. You have a slightly broader picture. Yeah, you can see it there. There's the battle, right? Alexander and his chariot. He's on the left-hand side. He's one of the only things you can see there left of Alexander's army is his horse's head and Alexander himself as he rides into wage war against the Persians, who he would conquer. Go back to the bigger picture yet. You can just see how beautifully detailed this is. And it's pretty staggering that this was functional art, right? This was functional art, something that you would do to decorate the floor of usually a bathhouse. And so you could be walking back and forth to your big heated indoor water bath that they had in Pompeii. How complicated the civilization was. And you could have been walking on the beautiful face of Alexander, even as Pompeii was spewing its ash, right?
It's pretty fascinating when you take a look at it, because some people still do puzzles, but to think of like how intricate that is, how large of a scale it is, and like you said, it was a floor mosaic. So, you know, it takes, I guess, a little bit for granted when we don't look around at the art that's in front of us and in the detail and the work that really goes into it. And I found it fascinating that of the bits that are left, just around Alexander, everything else is gone. How is it that survived? And yet everything else burned to ash, right?
Yeah, the great man found a way to live on, right? Alexander is posed in action, killing a man with a spear or a javelin in his right arm. He features a Roman nose and a stoic look in combat. Alexander wears a breastplate with the head of Medusa, the famous Gorgon, who would turn everybody who looked upon her to stone. And of course, Alexander rides one of the most famous horses in the history of the world. That horse is Bucephalus, right? That was its name, and it's come down through history as one of the most famous horses in the entire world, in the history of the world. Alexander had a closer relationship to Bucephalus almost to anybody else. And don't forget, this is the same great commander, Alexander the Great, who in 323 BC actually sat down on a stone and wept because he had conquered everything he could see. And he had conquered the world as he knew it, and wept tears because he had no worlds left to conquer. He took Aristotle, Alexander would take Aristotle, the great Aristotle, on campaign with him. Aristotle was his tutor. It said that Alexander slept with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow and loved his horse Bucephalus.
That's such a nice story. And that will do it for this Monday episode. If you like the show, please help us keep others educated by liking and sharing this episode with your family and friends on all the platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Parler. And if you're a fan of the audio podcast, please give it a 5-star review and leave us a nice comment, because that is actually what helps us keep being seen and moving up the rankings. So please feel free, 5-star review.
If you don't show, we don't grow. Just a quick reminder, our Judeo-Christian K-12 online school is currently enrolling for fall. Hey! A way to educate your kids that does not include the public schools, that does not include sexualization of children. There is actual history in it. We teach your kids literature, history, math, and science as if they matter, not the sociology of those things. Simply request a free packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedomforschool.com. Check us out. Check out what we do. We are shockingly inexpensive for what you get. A whole year's worth of school. Your kids can get a diploma from us. They can learn from the comfort of your own home. There's the rub. Yes, they can stay home and learn. If you can handle that, right? If you love your kids enough to tolerate them so they can get a real education, check out Freedom Project Academy. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. And until next time, be kind to your Bucephalases, my friends.